Welcome back to another MOTOBOB video, and today Yamaha announced a highly anticipated motorcycle. It's the World Raid edition of their already hugely popular Tenere 700 middleweight adventure bike. So in this video we'll go through all of the details and I'll tell you 15 things that you need to know about it. But before we get started, a massive thanks to Beeline Moto for sponsoring the channel. They make these awesome little navigation devices that fit on pretty much any bike. So if you've got something like the Tenere 700 with a simple dash, you can easily add navigation functionality without cluttering the cockpit. There's a link in the description to my full review as well as to the Beeline website where you can find out more. Now let's start with a reminder of the base bike, the Tenere 700. It's built upon the same platform as their other CP2 engine bikes like the MT-07, the Tracer 7, the XSR 700 and the R7, but of course it's got some key adaptations that make it a great all-round adventure bike. So yes, it gets the same 689cc 270-degree parallel twin that makes 72 horsepower and 68 Nm of peak torque, but it gets its own frame design wrapped around it with a cradle at the front for a little extra protection and an anti-squat design at the rear to improve handling off-road. Now it doesn't have all the riding modes or the full suite of gadgets that you might find on other adventure bikes, but that's why people love it. It shuns all of that to offer good mechanical fundamentals at a compelling price point. The T7 is an adventure bike that can actually happily off-road, and so a couple of years after it launched we got the rally version with more protection like the big sump guard, a longer flat seat and a cool paint job. Definitely looks the part but didn't really add much in terms of performance. But then a few months ago at the EICMA trade show in Milan we got this Raid prototype which has the absolute works in terms of performance upgrades. Suspension, brakes, exhaust, steering damper, more fuel capacity, but perhaps this one's too far the other way and massively out of most people's price range. That's where this new World Raid fits in. Some of the perks of that prototype, but in a production-ready, more affordable package. So here's everything they've done to it to make it a more capable, long-distance, all-terrain bike. Firstly, more tank capacity, so this one gets a dual-fuel tank design that sits lower at either side, and it increases the total capacity to 23 litres over the 16 of the standard T7. They say that the range is now up to 500 kilometers or about 310 miles. Pretty massive and ideal if you do like to ride in more remote locations where fuel stops are few and far between. Now not only does this lower position help to keep the center of gravity low, but also the top of the tank is lower than that of the regular T7, so it's easier for the rider to move back and forth. They also say there's less sloshing around of the fuel when cornering, which improves stability, and largely I'd say this is a massive plus on this new bike. The 890 Adventure from KTM uses a similar tank design that hangs over either side as per many of their other adventure bikes, and I found that bike to be super stable and easy to ride despite having decent fuel capacity. The other option they could have gone for would be a rear fuel pod as shown on the prototype and the upcoming Desert X from Ducati. But with the Ducati, you actually have to pump the fuel into the main tank with a button on the switchgear once the main tank reaches a certain level. So overall, I'd say it's less convenient and it's an accessory, so it adds to the cost. So yeah, this one's a hit for the Yamaha. Now I just mentioned improved mobility for the rider owing to that lower tank, and that's clearly a big benefit if you ride off-road a lot. And so they've also fitted a new seat which sits pretty tall now at 890mm, so 20mm higher than the standard bike. So yeah, if you compare them side by side, it's much flatter, that little bit taller, and so yeah, you can move back and forth easier but also transition between sitting and standing. They've also fitted a more grippy leather in the middle so you get more purchase on your backside when you're seated, but then there's a smoother area outside of that to allow you to slide around a bit more when maneuvering. And then despite appearances of one long surface, it's actually a two-piece design, so you can remove the back bit and fit accessories like luggage or a rack. Up at the front we've got a big upgrade to the dash, so the regular bike gets a fairly basic vertically orientated LCD screen, but the World Raid gets a 5-inch color TFT with phone connectivity. First up, you can see text messages and incoming calls on the screen as well as the status of your phone battery, but I think more importantly to most Tenere riders will be the ability to see any technical issues or warnings with the bike, which of course could be somewhat useful if you're doing long trips on it. You also get 3 different layouts, so Explorer, Street and Raid, and it's all pretty nice, but from what I can tell in the press release, there's no navigation integration, so you might still need that Beeline Moto after all. Links in the description. Look, it definitely modernizes the cockpit and it does look pretty cool, but I don't think it's massively necessary on this bike. I mean, the Desert X that we just talked about has a similar vertical TFT, but that bike inherits plenty of rider aids and electronics from the Multistrada that it's based upon. And so it'd be pretty hard to manage all the settings and menu items with like an old school LCD. But the Tenere, I mean, it's super simple. This World Raid system does get a new 3-mode ABS system, so Mode 1 is fully on for road riding, Mode 2 front wheel on, rear wheel off for sliding the back end, and then Mode 3 is fully off for sliding both ends. But that's it, no traction control, no wheelie control, no cruise control, no navigation like I say. And with the technical issues, you can get a fairly affordable OBD2 reader and just go straight to your phone over Bluetooth. Look, it is a nicer dash, but for me on this bike, it's not a revelation. There is plenty of good stuff elsewhere though. A new high-spec 43mm KYB upside-down fork with an increase in travel of 20mm, so now 230mm in total. That means it's ready to take on some rougher terrain, and it also gets preload adjustment alongside the rebound and compression damping of the standard bike, which should allow the rider to set the bike up better for different surface conditions and loads. On top of that, they get a Kashima coating on the outer tube for better durability and reduced friction, and there are new lightweight internals which help keep the weight down despite the longer stroke. Now, a lot of rally riders use steering dampers to keep the front end in check, and this one gets an Öhlins damper with 18 different settings. It's intentionally mounted up top as opposed to underneath like you'll see on some road bikes, so that the rider can make quick changes on the fly. Now the rear shock also gets a bump in spec, again with 20mm more travel, so 220mm in total, and it gets a new spring rate, new damping characteristics, and a revised linkage ratio to give it a comfy ride on the road at the same time as being able to take some bigger hits. You also get an aluminium body for efficient heat dissipation, a piggyback reservoir to help prevent oil cavitation, and a new rubber bumper to soak up more energy if the shock does bottom out. There's also a new AIRBOX design better suited to off-road riding, with a forward-facing intake to avoid inhaling debris thrown up by the rear wheel, a 15mm taller windscreen for better wind protection for those long stints in the saddle, and some bigger side deflectors which can easily be removed if you so wish. LED indicators or turn signals for my American viewers are standard fitment. Those are a couple of £100 extra on the standard bike. The front cowling is new, so around the radiator and the internal cockpit panel, and it's made from tough fiberglass composite in order to handle more impact should the bike go down. There's a new radiator grille too, which they say has vertical louvre like Yamaha's off-road competition models, and a 3-piece engine guard which obviously protects the important stuff from drops. And it's worth adding that ground clearance is up by 10mm to 250 owing to the longer suspension. You've got bigger footrests too for more grip and less pressure when riding off-road, and they get removable rubber inserts. And then that brings us swiftly onto the price, which is £11,600. Now, whether that sounds like a lot of money or not really depends on your starting point. I mean, the standard bike is £9,700 now. It's crept up quite a bit since they first launched it, and the Rally Edition starts at 11 grand, so 11,600 sounds pretty decent for all that extra kit. But on the other hand, if out and out off-road ability isn't of concern to you, and you actually want some rider aids and creature comforts, then there are a lot of good bikes out there for that money. You could get into the Tiger 900 lineup, BMW F850 GS, the KTM 890, and near enough the Husqvarna Norden 901, which is a lot of bike and style points. And so I put it to you, the audience, if you had 11.5 grand in your pocket, would you buy this or something else? Let me know down in the comments below. And if you're new here and you want to see more videos like this, hit subscribe and I'll catch you in the next one.